Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast on this bank holiday Monday. I hope you're all doing well. Mikey, Stafford here. We're talking football in the company of Kevin McStay, Conor Neville of RTÉ Online, and as always, Rory O'Neill. How are we, lads?
Very good, Mikey.
Good stuff. We've a podcast debutant coming up in a bit, Shane McGrath, formerly of Tipperary, to talk about the hurling. But I think...
Do we have to?
You know what? No, we're good. Rory, people get angry if we focus on Cork, so we won't. We'll focus on Clare.
And rightly so.
Yeah, can't talk about a busted flush all day. Anyway, speaking of busted flushes to matters in Oma.
Yeah. Good segue there.
Thanks. That is a nicer way into it than me crowing yet again about being the sage football tipster. It may have been a half-hearted tip for Derry, but I did stick with my tip for the Ulster Championship. And Kevin, it's looking like they're very, as always, the Ulster Championship is stuffed with intrigue. But if you put if you inflict an 11-point win on the All Ireland champions, even if they're off colour, you have to be in the running to win a provincial championship.
Yeah, and the manner in which they did it, Mikey, was very, very impressive. From it's something I'm sure I'll be talking about later when we're chatting about Dublin against your own lads in Wexford. The manner of it is what's significant in that it's from the gun to the finish line. It was consistent application of an attitude and a plan, I'd say, that they had long contemplated back home in Derry, and they rolled it out with real efficiency and commitment to every aspect. That they were tactically perfect, and they never got ahead of that. In other words, even when they got the gap, they still got around the 2 minutes out of their shot clock if that's what they wanted to do, if they felt that was the right thing to do. I thought it was superb. Their commitment to that championship game was complete. This was the All Ireland for them, and that's always the problem for the champion team when you're being chased. That this game becomes the All Ireland for the opposition. And I did a few of those games. In fact, I did the last big surprise, I think, for Derry. I think it was against Tyrone as well, and they may well have been champions back then.
2006, yeah.
So, yeah, they were.
I was at that game. I was co-common with one of the lads, and they pulled off the surprise. The little bit we get down south that we don't fully realise down south is the nature of this rivalry. I won't say it's quite Galway Mayo or Kerry Cork perhaps, but it's up there. It's well up there. There'd be no love lost between them, and the Derry would see this as the match of the year for them. And it was I suppose it was kind of astonishing, really, that not that they won it. I think we've spoken about that. I don't think that was astonishing. It was a surprise, an upset, a mild surprise. I don't know which one you want. I wouldn't have tipped them now. In fairness, Mikey, I wouldn't have gone for them for the win, but I did see it being very close. But then flip the coin, the absolute implosion of the champions was amazing to see. In terms of their attitude was just so off. It was shocking, and then the discipline started to fall apart. They never put a hand on them, did they? Really? So. Completely a compelling victory for Derry, and of course it puts them to answer your question. Of course, it puts them in the seat for Ulster champions. But they have some fence to jump in the next round, and if they were to get to the final, they have another fence. It'd nearly take two more performances like yesterday, probably, for them to win. But are they capable of doing that? They most likely are, because they have a clever backroom team. And they have a lot of good footballers that seem very committed to doing something major in 2022. That's my sense of it.
Yeah. Rory, the idea is that, I think it was mentioned on the Sunday game last night, that Derry out-Tyroned Tyrone, which is kind of a nice way of putting it. They ran the legs off them, didn't they? Rory Gallagher said it was teamwork. I think 11 of their points came from turnovers. They limited Tyrone to 16 shots. Tyrone were off colour, but you kind of got a chicken and the egg situation here, haven't you? Tyrone, how off colour were Tyrone before the ball was thrown in, and how off colour were they because of just the red wave that faced them?
Derry came with a plan, as Kevin said, and just absolutely destroyed them. I think 11 points, maybe even flatters Tyrone. I think there was probably more for Derry if they had really pushed on. They were obviously playing against 14 men for large parts of he just got sent off just before half time, wasn't it?
Yeah, 26 or 7 minutes.
Yeah, and then obviously down to 13 men then, like at the end. Which would suggest, I mean, if you kind of look at, like, I mean, the starting point, I suppose, is the All-Ireland champions. Should we be surprised? They had a dreadful league campaign, by and large, saved themselves to last. Involved in a major row in Armagh. Then there's another shemazel the last day. You know, loads of defections from the panel. Bad vibes coming out of the place. Have historically struggled to defend their All-Ireland crown. Now, I know that's a different era. But I was listening to another podcast, Kieran Murphy on Second Captains.
How dare you?
Yeah, it's a very good one. It's a very good one, right? And he made quite an outlandish claim where he described them as the worst All-Ireland champions of the last 30 years. And I see Dick Clerkin is writing.
Dick Clerkin says something similar, yeah.
Dick Clerkin is writing in The Independent this morning, saying that what we saw yesterday reinforces the notion that last year's All-Ireland victory was lucky. Like, those kind of catcalls are going to grow louder now, you know.
There's no such thing.
I don't agree either, Kev. Yeah, there isn't. And look, they had a hard-fought Ulster championship. They earned their crust coming through Ulster and then had to beat Kerry. Now, admittedly, Kerry had to do effectively a whole new preseason while they were waiting for that All-Ireland semi-final because it dragged out so long and lost all their early season form as a result. But
they had to beat a Mayo team who had beaten Dublin.
Yeah,
so that doesn't make that a lucky All-Ireland.
Yeah, but look, I suppose, yeah, it's been a disappointing exit from the Ulster Championship. Their reign, I suppose, as All-Ireland champions is technically not over still. But you wouldn't be putting much support behind the notion that they're going to retain that crown at this stage.
No, I laugh at the idea of Kerry's Kerry losing the momentum of a Munster football championship, but which all their All-Ireland titles are always based on. Conor, let's stick with Tyrone for a second. And I read Dick Clerkin there just not long before we started recording, and I thought it was unfair, and I wouldn't agree with Murph either. I think Tyrone were fantastic last year. I think they just, it's hard to describe it. Like the alteration in how they played under Mickey Hart, how they play under the two lads was phenomenal, and they played to their strengths, which is all any team can do. And they beat what was put in front of them, and that included Kerry and Mayo. So I think it's unfair to say that they're the worst All-Ireland winners 30 years, and it's very unfair to say they were lucky. But it is fair to say that the arse has fallen out of them this year.
Yeah, it's very curious. I mean, the thing, just narrowing it down to that game yesterday, the thing that struck me the most was Brian Kennedy's sending off, because it's the kind of thing that happens very late in the match. It's needless kicking out. And that was just before half-time, or about 8 minutes before half-time. Score still 7-4. And when that happened, they're down to 14. They haven't played that well, but it was indicative of something. It sort of suggested that there's a general malaise. If you have a player, if you have that discipline ill discipline being shown before even half-time in a key championship game, suggests all isn't entirely well there. I know there was a lot of defections during the league, and that was a bit troubling on one level. On another level, you said, well, most of those players were kind of a lot of them were fringe players. I think none of them had started either the semi-final or final last year. So, and that's, you were inclined to maybe write that off a bit, but you have to look at that again and say, there have been bad vibes around Tyrone since the beginning of the year. They've obviously a miserable record in terms of defending titles before. Now, I know that was in a different era, I suppose. 2006 was mentioned there. I mean, that was probably the worst title defense in history. I think Laois subsequently
knocked them out in a qualifier. That's correct.
Subsequently beat them in a qualifier. So they have there's a kind of almost a tradition now growing of this happening. As for the worst All-Ireland winners of all time, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, they came through a tough Ulster Championship, beat Kerry, and then beat Mayo after all that. I mean, I think it was hard won. I mean, there's a couple of other candidates that come to mind who I won't mention at the moment. But,
no, you can show it out there.
You can say 2010 if you want, Conor. It's okay.
I can say 2010 if I want.
It was a hard All-Ireland to win, lads, believe me.
All the provincial finalists went out the same.
95
Provincial winners
came to
went out the
mind.
same day. Yeah.
If we got onto the annoying the dub segment, you had 95 came to mind.
There's plenty of competition there, I would say.
Yeah. But
as a Mayo man, I'll take any one of those lucky ones that were going. No problem. Or not deserved. Any of those type, I'll jump in and take them.
Yeah. We can rewrite the history books. Yes, Connor.
You don't know how the qualifiers are going to pan out, but the manner of
the Laois won't be knocking them out anyway.
We're knocking them out, but the manner of the loss.
Imagine if they draw Armagh the Athletic Grounds. That'd be some crack.
Yeah, how many sendings off? What is it, 3 or 4?
Yeah, look, they're a bit off colour, but I think, Kevin, it would be doing an injustice to Derry to not kind of. I know you have already praised them, but to me, I always look at, say, half back line and a full forward line, and if the two of them are operating well, you won't be too far off. And yesterday, that's kind of what Derry had. They had their half back. They had probably the two contenders for man of the match in their half back line. Conor Doherty got it, but you could have definitely made a strong case for McKinless getting it. And then forward
line got a big score, didn't they?
Yeah, Benny Heron got 2 from play. McGuigan only got 2 from play, and 2 from play for Niall Loughlin as well. And obviously McGuigan and Loughlin contributed from frees. But I guess it was almost like the link between those two areas of the pitch. Like they were just playing old fashioned one bounce, like kick passes in, and Heron was out in front every time. Loughlin was out in front every time. I was going to make this point about Clare and hurling later. Sometimes a team can make a game look simple enough, like, and it is a simple game when it's played right. Derry played it right yesterday, and they might have been let to an extent, but they're very talented footballers, and Rory Gallagher has them playing a way that suits them. And that's, like I said about Tyrone last year, that goes a long way to winning your matches.
Just about every single play by Derry was a replica of everybody back, ferocious commitment to the proper word I'd say is the steal rather than the turnover. Turnovers are bad, steals are good, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To total commitment to winning the ball back quickly. And they were ferocious at that. And then total commitment to the break, the transition as in breaking out. And they tried to get the ball in early on that, as you just said to Hearn, out in front. See, can you loop with somebody or can you get your own shot off? And in many respects, it was a very simple game plan. But the problem was to execute it was going to take total physical and mental commitment. And that's where the real kudos have to go to in terms of the plan and the execution of it. It was perfect and it was relentless. It never stopped. There was nobody allowed to go freelancing out of it. Even, the fine players they have, McGuigan, Heron, etc., who have lots of other qualities, they stayed very well within the framework that Derry were going to insist on, so that they never gave any oxygen at all to Tyrone. And then, as Conor says, obviously the sending off took whatever chance there was, well, certainly the first sending off, whatever chance there was, because when you were down a man, now you saw the madness that had to happen with Morgan coming up, trying to mark space at the midfield area. So there's it becomes a bit chaotic. So playing against a team like Derry, down a man, is savage. It's bad enough to start with, but now you're down a man, it becomes, certainly the offensive threat from the opposition is nearly gone. And you can look at the Tyrone scoreline to see, well, that's pretty much it. So I would say a really excellent plan, perfectly executed. And but can they do that again now for 2 more big games in Ulster? That'll be the test.
Well, their fitness has been remarked on, Rory, since the start of the season.
They're super fit.
They're super fit. But it seems their manager is in pretty good nick too, because it was commented on a lot yesterday, and Damien O'Mara put it to him in his post-match interview that how exercised he was. And really I think it's Dick Clerkin who says it today. We should have cameras trained on himself and Banty now the next day, because the activity on the sideline will be off the charts.
He's unbelievably vocal as well. I mean, he was so into it from start to finish. It was a relentless performance by Derry, and he was pretty relentless on the line, constantly, in their ears, up and down with the officials, getting involved with players as they were coming off, gesticulating to the crowd, cheering every score. Like, I think that's not a bad thing to see in a manager. Sometimes they can be quite.
Not if you're the opposition. Not if you're the opposition manager. It's not nice.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what it is.
True.
But anyway,
but look, I think that adds a bit of color to the whole pageantry around the occasion for neutrals and certainly for supporters watching. Can it be a bit of a distraction? Well, I suppose that just depends on how the team is playing ultimately. And like, in fairness, he had his team primed yesterday. They have some savage players. Like Derry have some really, really good footballers. I don't think that should get lost. As you mentioned earlier, Mikey, they have a terrific half back line in Conor Doherty, McKinless, and McGrogan, and
Rogers and
Chrissy McKaig inside in the full back line. They've got depth at midfield. They've got, options on the bench.
Yesterday.
Emmett Bradley could potentially be coming in. You got that young lad Lachlan Murray, who looks a really good prospect, but still very, very young. Kieran McFall, obviously, what will he be thinking on his way to America?
He's there by now, unless he took a steamer.
Yeah, so like, I mean, Jenny, they could go on a bit of a journey this year. But I think Kevin's point is also well made. Can they replicate that performance now the next day against Monaghan, who will present a very different challenge?
Conor Doherty, not Conan Doherty. He's a former colleague of mine who was on the telly yesterday. He's a Derry fan. He wasn't. He wishes he was playing. He made the point that it was. This is Conor Doherty I'm talking about now, man of the match and birthday boy. He made the point that it was 3 years in the making, this win, and it was interesting. Damien just asked Gallagher or Conor like a question about what was the game plan. He said it was just teamwork, work together. But he carried on with the answer himself. Then it was kind of revealing. He said, didn't particularly enjoy the first 8 or 9 months, but together with the county board, we just kept building on it. And we've committed to each other in the last 18 months, was his point. That's interesting that he wasn't asked to volunteer that, but he kind of gave it. He said, we had a tough start, but in the last year and a half, kind of, I've got things the way I want them. And with Rory Gallagher, you always get the impression it's either his way 100% or he's not going to be interested, because he clearly does ask it out of his players.
Well, that could have been, that was COVID was his first year, so that could have accounted for some of that disruption or lack of enjoyment. There is a perception that, of course, Derry got a bit of a burst during COVID. They had a fantastic Division 3 campaign last year. They absolutely hammered everyone out the gate. They have been talked about for a long time. They could have made this breakthrough last year, very close to it against Donegal in that game.
Yeah. It had been a back door last year, Conor.
Yeah,
who knows,
absolutely. Who knows where the quarter-final team, possibly, I would have said. But they huge hype about them in Division 2, and then they sort of air went out of the bag a bit towards the end of Division 2 with that.
Well, they had their fixtures were backloaded, so
the blitz against Galway, even failing to beat Roscommon in a game that was there for them, the controversial call at the end. So that was disappointing, and then kind of the narrative moved elsewhere and people stopped hyping them. But clearly they've always been building, and Tyrone were very. Whatever psychological conditions are there in Tyrone at the moment, they were very vulnerable to this sort of hungry team coming along and demolishing them. And it's not at all a surprise. It is a surprise that the game was over at half time. When that penalty went in, the game was over.
Yeah.
So I think Derry, we have seen it before, teams bursting from nowhere and winning Ulster. Even Jim McGuinness with Donegal in his first year, they weren't mapped really before he came in. They won Ulster immediately. Derry could do that easily. Now they have a very tough game against Monaghan coming up, and I fancy the winners at the Monaghan-Derry game to win Ulster, actually.
That's a conversation for another day. But listen, it was a game to make us stand up and take notice. We'll move to matters in Munster now, and it's funny you mentioned Niall Morgan coming up and marking space, Kevin. Yesterday we were laughing at him scampering back to his goal and annoyed that the Derry players didn't try the lob. That's how focused we are. And one of the lads in work suggested instead of penalties, they should start the offensive player on the 60-yard line and start the goalkeeper on the 45-yard line, and that's how you should settle a match. But
cat and mouse.
Yeah. But
the penalties are the best, aren't they? Penalties are the best way to settle.
I'm actually, I was almost wanting to avoid discussing the merits of them or not, but it was the first one. So, no. But like the fact of the matter is,
last night and the boys saying, take shots from outside the D. You'd fall asleep watching that.
Yeah, but they've tried all of these, Kev.
Yeah, and they were dull. They were dull, and they were kind of embarrassing for players as well. Who
could you imagine a big match in Croke Park and you're taking penalties into the canal and the place jammed behind it, it would be sensational.
Some of the pictures from Saturday night were brilliant. Every kid in the place who was quick enough to move once the referee decided which end they were going to was belted down. There was great pictures.
Do you see the three lads with the high vis on? They were to the left, like high vis, and you're taking penalties and your eye line.
Like, it's also a game of football with a round football with a goal. If there was a better way, do you not think the multi-billion euro dollar industry that is soccer would have figured it out by now? You know, like the chances are
you were the golden goal.
They've tried everything too.
Oh yeah, that's right, the ice hockey style one. But
and then you start on the 45 and you have to run in, and
it wouldn't be bad. But this argument, Kevin, that it's not a skill of the game, is nonsense. Of course, penalty taking is a skill of the game.
It's a huge skill. It's often again. I asked Mayo about penalties. You know, so it's a massive skill. And actually, I'd have to commend the Limerick penalty takers in the shootout. I only saw them last night for the first time, but I was tuned into the radio, obviously, listening to it on Saturday evening. But the quality of the penalty taken was, like, what people forget, and I've often been coaching this now with my own minor players, etc., is number one, the size of the width of the goal in Gaelic compared to soccer is 3 foot short of it. So the whole idea that it's not a difficult skill, like before
the ball is heavier.
The ball, and it used to be in my day back out on the old line, the 13-meter line. It's on the 11 now. At least it gives you a bit of a chance. I mean, in the old days, the clever call was to pull a fella down, because it was definitely not even 50-50, because by the time the goalie would nearly be tackling you as you were taking the shot. So it's all a little bit fairer now, but the skill of it is now, one little caveat I'd put in is I don't buy the goalies in Gaelic diving the wrong way. That has not. I've often spoken to goalkeeper coaches that there is no requirement in Gaelic football for a goalie to second guess the position. He can stay up and go for it because of the 3 foot that's missing, if you like. But it is a great skill, Mikey, and it's the only way to finish a game that's level after extra time. No, there's no other way.
I have a terrible record. I've retired from Gaelic football to concentrate on my junior hurling career here in Wicklow. But as a Gaelic football goalkeeper, I had a terrible record.
There's a statement to be issued on that, is there?
Yeah.
The team start practicing them now. I mean, that's the question. I mean,
we should have anyway, because I was brutal. I was a man to go the wrong way a lot, Kev. A long way. The interesting thing for me, Conor, was what Billy Lee said after the matches. Full time went himself and the backroom team got in a huddle. He put 5 names down on a piece of paper. He said, "They're my 5 takers." Then they got the players all together and they asked the players to put up their names. And the 5 players on his piece of paper were the 5 players who put up their names. Wow. Peter Nash, Ian Corbett, Robbie Burke, Brian Donovan, and James Naughton. So then he put them in the order he wanted, which was right. And it was Peter Nash who didn't get to take one. But like we've been praising Billy Lee a lot here, but like the man clearly knows his players, and he sounds like they were practice penalties because he knew who should be taking them and who would take them.
It bodes well. I mean, that solves the dilemma that's often faced managers in penalty shootouts before. I mean, who wants to take it, or who do you think is best to take it? And they don't often match up a lot of the time in the pressure moment. But it's great that it did. Obviously, it paid off. I mean, pretty one-sided shootout really in the end. But yeah, there's still a few holdouts in soccer. I think some of the old purists who still resent penalties coming in the 80s. I'm reading Brian Glanville back in the day, talking about it being an obscenity. Gaelic football, it's even more of a cultural leap, I would say. I know Billy Sheehan said earlier in the year that he didn't believe it was a skill in Gaelic football and that there should be another way found, maybe kicking frees or something out of the hands. But it's exciting, and in the circumstances where 2 teams can't be separated after 90 minutes, I mean, it seems as good a way as any at this point.
And you've got no floodlights in Cusick Park, so you're running out of options.
And obviously we're trying to cut down on replays essentially. So.
Yeah.
But that's another issue. Like we're in blitz format here. The championships are being run off in a blitz format, so you can't afford replay. And this just puts the tin hat on it in terms of making sure that the game comes to a conclusion. But yeah, it was certainly dramatic.
Yeah, but Kevin, I think in the end of the day, Clare will be absolutely kicking themselves because this game shouldn't have gone to extra time. Donald O'Sullivan, the Limerick goalkeeper, is being praised for his late save, and far be it from a terrible junior B goalkeeper like me to take away from him. But Gavin Cooney kicked the ball at his foot. He'd gone down to his left. Cooney had the whole other side of the goal, and he hit the keeper in the foot. It was a save, of course it was a save, and he was in the way of it. That's all the keeper can do. But the ball should have been nowhere near his foot once he went down, should it?
But he's entitled to claim it as a save. Obviously, it hit him.
It is. Yeah, it's a save.
Yeah,
but
it's entitled to claim as a save. Anybody in the goalkeeping
in the way of it
will claim that one. But it actually reminded me of a goal the Gooch scored against Mayo one year in the final, where he did the exact same shimmy, but he kept his composure and passed it into the big gaping hole on the left-hand side of the goal, which is what the requirement was.
He never went for power, Gooch. He
just placed it lovely. The goalie was going in the opposite direction. It was just perfection. But you see, this is what makes me laugh. These are not real skills, or there's no pressure. There's pressure in everything.
Oh, absolutely.
And he had the winning of the game essentially there if he just rolls it in. But the brain is going at 100 miles an hour. The sweat is falling into your eyes, and mad things happen. And the poor lad just hit it straight at the keeper, and the rest is now history. And Clare will be kicking themselves because this looked like a very likely ticket, and something they probably deserved. But we know you get nothing. There's nothing deserved in this game. But you would have felt that Clare had paid their dues to the Munster Championship, and this was their golden ticket now into a Munster final. You'd have fancied them to go ahead and beat Tip. I would anyway. But I have to say fair play to Limerick. They kept at it, and they're quite deserving of this opportunity now as well. Tip will certainly fancy their chances. They won't. I would say it's slightly in favour of Tip now to make that final because of the recent experience. I know they've lost a lot of players since that. But
they're at home as well.
I think the big losers are they at home as well.
Yeah, it's in Thurles. Yeah,
that's another couple.
Never the biggest advantage for the Tipperary footballers.
No, but
they'll probably be training there more often than the Tipperary hurlers at the minute. Anyway, that's for sure.
If you put it, the big losers in Munster yesterday, when you peel it all back, were certainly Clare.
Yeah. What do you make of that, Roy? That I know you were very impressed with Tip in the Division 4 final, but Limerick have been, they've been a common team, and okay, Clare had their injuries, but they came through a real battle there. So it'll be an interesting semi-final, which, if we just focus on it as a semi-final. But for Tip, it's a very big carrot because it means
big time.
Sam Maguire for them.
Yeah, there you go. And they'd be the first team possibly to avoid going into the Tailteann. But we used to often make the point around the Leinster Championship about how good it would be if Dublin were extricated from it, because you've probably got 10 teams then at a reasonably poor level, admittedly, but you have 10 teams of a similar level. I think you could probably say the same about the Munster Football Championship in terms of Kerry. If you took Kerry out of it, I think it would be quite competitive, right across the board. The other 5, well, certainly 4. There's not too much now between the other 4 teams. Waterford, we were probably expecting a little bit more from them, over the weekend, especially they were at home Fairfield. But look, Tip did, what Tip have, I suppose, been building towards in terms of trying to put together a brand new team. And they're going to be at home, Munster semi-final now. And the only thing is, last year, wasn't it last year that Conor Sweeney kicked that worldie from underneath the Mackie stand and down in Limerick? Was it 2020 or 2021?
It was the semi-final, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that'll probably still be there in the memory bank from a Limerick perspective. So they won't be lacking motivation. I think there's good momentum behind them now, obviously having got a promotion and a really good championship victory under their belt. And it'll be a good opportunity for them, to make a Munster final and have a rattle off Kerry.
Yeah, you mentioned how the Munster Championship perhaps is a little bit like the Leinster Championship. If you just have one big monster, and all the rest. Conor, unfortunately, I don't think this holds true anymore because we talked it up quite a lot the Leinster Championship here last week. You know, this is where the romance will be. We weren't including Wexford and Dublin in that. Even I hadn't been smoking anything strong enough to think Wexford were going to beat Dublin. But, you know, we had some hope for Wicklow being competitive. We had, well, I at least had quite a lot of hope for Louth really asking questions of Kildare. And I don't know if there was romance in your own Longford's match against Westmeath, but Westmeath were fancied as the home team. And like those were three... There was 4 very straightforward quarterfinals in Leinster, so this idea that it's the great utopia without Dublin maybe doesn't hold water.
Yeah, I'm not sure Meath found it that straightforward. I know they won by 10 in the end. I think there was still only 4 in it at half time, even after that. Was it 9 seconds, the goal?
Two fluky goals and the Wicklow forwards didn't turn up was the analysis I got from one man at the game.
So I don't know, is it that? I mean, I'm slightly underwhelmed by me. I think Meath puts about 7 goals past. That might have been, I'm not sure, was that Wicklow.
But for those of you who missed it last night, by the way, it's Meath, Dublin, and Kildare, Westmeath in the Leinster semi-finals.
Yeah. No romance in the other games. I'm not sure how much romance would have been in Louth overturning Kildare. I mean, they've actually done it quite often in the past 30 years. I think 91, they might have beat them with Miko's first team. They beat them in 2010 as well. In terms of the down the line for the Leinster Championship, I think it was probably better that Kildare demonstrated, you know, their credentials yesterday. They look very impressive now in the highlights. I only saw the highlights. Just the zip in their forwards. There's huge raw athletic prowess there in Kildare, I always think, which isn't sort of sometimes matched by their nous in tight situations. But, you know, they look really good. And I'm optimistic they can have a crack at Dublin. I mean, I still think Dublin will probably win Leinster this year, but we're getting close to the point where Kildare could be, you know, I'm very hesitant about saying this. I mean, you have to tiptoe up to this, but they could be getting close to the point where it'll be very close between.
No,
would you think so, Kev? No, neither would I.
No, Kev's shaking his head. Kev, you were in Wexford Park, and look, poor old Wexford. It was after the Lord Mayor's show of beating Offaly, which admittedly is not the greatest Lord Mayor's show you're ever going to get. But this was, I think we used this analogy a couple of times here. This was Lions and Christian stuff. So how much did we really learn about Dublin?
Well, I was doing a piece this morning about that, Mikey, trying to say, what do you learn when you beat an inferior team? And generally speaking, not a lot, unless the performance is what you were coaching about in the week or fortnight before. Okay, so like you wouldn't have to be a rocket scientist in the Dublin management team to say that, like, you know, look, when you have your management, we're likely to win this. This could be a rout even if we hit all our sweet spots. What are we looking for from the game? So you have your list. Consistent application is always the number one thing. What did Desi say last night in the interview? Really pleased with the consistent application of the tactical plan. Like, I'll give you a few measurements of it, Mikey, to give you a sense of it. And you can take it from what you want then. The new goalkeeping guy, the debutant, Young O'Hanlon, he consistently beat 4 seconds on the ball to tee stopwatch.
You can tell this was over as a competition quickly, Kevin, the stopwatch out for the kickouts.
Well, yeah, but see, this is part of this is what they want. They want the ball on the tee at 4 seconds so that they have the options out the field. Mm-hmm. Their tackling was outrageous. Their conditioning was excellent, and their hunger was obvious. I thought it was an outstanding performance, and that's maybe kind of where we differ slightly. In fact, I think Westmeath will ask major questions of Kildare in the semi-final. But anyway, going back to Wexford. To Wexford Park, to the Dublin match, it was just the hunger of it, like Fenton's display at midfield, and he wasn't far behind him now.
And Conor Callaghan as well.
And Conor Callaghan's like every ball Conor Callaghan got, lads. His explosive first step.
That's the thing, Kev. That's the thing, Kev. His ability to stop. He could have a goal on every play. His ability to stop and turn. You know, like you know the way some lads might need an extra step or two just to slow down so they can stop and turn. He can stop and turn, like he can create, and he's so direct. the minute he gets a ball into his hand, now he does fist the ball over the bar quite a lot, but I think that's half the time because of the angles that he tends to come in at. But an absolute nightmare. I mean, people were, making a big thing around his absence during the league and the difference that he might make when he came back on the scene. And even some Dublin supporters were, slightly circumspect about putting too much credence upon the impact that he'll bring when he comes back into the team. Now, I know it was, again, caveated by the fact that it was against Wexford, but I think we saw exactly the impact that he brings. He's just a weapon in there.
And he's up there. He's in the
David Clifford category.
You bet me to it. He's in the Clifford category. And I'll give you one more example, Mikey, of this adherence to the pre-match objectives and what we want to see, lads, from you, and everyone's playing for a jersey. If you fall back off this performance over 70, 75, there's going to be somebody fresh brought in, because we're taking this as preparation for the full Leinster Championship. So when Wexford, as lower ranked teams have a tendency to do, they come up narrow out of defence. When they're bringing it over and back, and then they come lateral, and some fella takes I'll chance a burst on the wing side, and that's a trap immediately, because you're going to use the line as the extra defender. And every time Wexford walked into that trap, it was double team, treble team of Dubs, and they just literally, without taking the ball off a child, they just pulverized them, and the ball squirted out, and they were gone again. And then this outrageous athleticism to that counter attack. They were coming in 3s and 4s off the shoulder. At the end, you said Con has a habit of hand passing the ball over the bar, which he has. But I'd suggest if the thing was tighter, I think he got a goal in 6, and of the 6 points he got, 1-6, pretty much 4 or 5 of those point chances on another day, if required, were goal. Yeah. And this, you made the point perfectly. Not only has he the explosive step, but he has the ability, like rugby lads, how they straighten the line. He straightens his own line. He just, off that first step, it's like he draws a line between himself and the crossbar, the black spot, and he goes for it, and get out of my way sort of thing. I just thought, and I know there is an asterisk about playing at, after all, Wexford are, ranked 30th nationally out of the division, and that was the challenge ahead of them. But they did everything. Dublin did everything. Merchant was identified as Brosnan's marker, and he just welded himself to him. He never left him. Brosnan, he got belts and wallops even when the game was in the butt end of the match. He was still getting, until he was taken off the poor lad.
Merchant was allowed one burst up the field, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He did. He ran about 80 yards in about 9 seconds.
There was a lad following him.
On a moped. The tongue was hanging out.
But I would say that Dublin have made the strongest of statements. Kev, couldn't do any more.
Yeah, and Kev, for me, right? Okay, they're not as good as they used to be, because the levels that they used to be were so high and so far enough, but they're still by a mile the best team in Leinster.
We finish up now, so I actually want to go back to the hand passing of points thing, because I was cranky watching this match now because it was over after 10 minutes. But Conor, where do you stand on this? Aesthetically, I think it looks crap. And secondly, which aesthetics aren't that important, I just don't think it's a skill. And I think the game could be made far more exciting if it was taken out as an option. I'd say there was 10. I'm guessing. But I'm gonna say there was close to 10. What do you think, Conor?
Well, there seems to be a clamour for it. It was never something that exercised me that much. But yeah, I mean, once upon a time you could fist a goal. Looking back on the Kerry Golden years,
the bomber threw the ball into the net about 20 times.
You won't get into those sore points again. But the Gaelic basketball era, that ended. I'm not sure when exactly that rule came out, but there seems to be a clamour for it. If you're, do people want, presumably the option, lads will just start kicking them. What happens if a goalie is really tight to you? Lads, often there is call for fisting it over if you're about to be smothered. You can't get the ball down to your foot in time. and you try and take the point. I mean, what happens then? Do lads just have to
There's
reverse
also
out of that situation?
there's also Conor, I think, now I had this discussion before with a referee. There is a safety aspect to it. If you're running in along the end line, and your only option really is to fist the ball over the bar, right? Now, let's say you take that option away. He's now got to kick it. When you go to kick it, it's a prone position. So in Gaelic football, so you're wide open. And you're going to have, you're wide open in that scenario then to be absolutely nailed. Whereas
it's broken leg territory.
Yeah, or ruptured spleen or punctured lung out over the sideline, as Paddy O'Shea might, like a bar, like a loaf of bread. Like a loaf of bread. So I think there is a safety aspect to it in that it just gives the player that extra bit of protection in terms of being like, if he feels that there's going to be a big hit coming, if he gets the hand pass away, at least he can brace himself. If he has to go and kick the ball, he's leaving himself wide open. That's what a ref said to me. Now I don't know,
Mikey. This is where a mistake was made with the rule in my, and of course it was done again because you had very poor referees who were unwilling to ref it. When they changed it from the fist only to the open hand, there's no skill with the open hand. But there is skill with the fist.
Yeah.
Especially when you're coming in from the left and you're a right-hander. Okay. You now have to be able, if you don't want to get the ball blocked, you have to fist it with your left. So the problem was that the referees were not calling open-handed points in the 5, 6, 7 years ago. And then they changed the rule where you can either fist it over, by fist I mean the closed, clenched hand, or you can finger roll it over, which is the top of your fingers, which is no skill. That is not a skill.
That's basically, that's tantamount to a throw.
Throwing it over.
So it's part of this thing that I have in with the GA rule book that, they wanted to get rid of the pickup. Every skill that players are finding difficult to execute, what's the solution? How we get rid of it? We'll dumb it down so that every Aegis who doesn't bother practicing the skill can get away with it. And that's essentially what happened, coupled with the fact that you had a lot of weak referees who were unwilling to call at the end of a big long move a fella that flicks it over the bar from an angle and said, well, we can't, it's impossible to tell. But the gas thing was, we were up commentating 100 yards away, and the first thing we'd all be saying is, that looked like an open hand to me. And then the replay, you'd see it, and it was as obvious as the nose in your face.
So would you be happy enough to keep the rule in if it goes back to the closed fist, Kev?
Correct.
Okay, there's a compromise I can live with. That's good. On that note of collegiality, we might leave it, Kev. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch you again soon. And Shane McGrath will be with us now in a second to talk about hurling, where they also like a questionable hand pass.
He hits it, it's over the bar! Oh, holy Moses!
Welcome back. We've been joined by former Tipperary hurler Shane McGrath. How are you doing, Shane?
How's it going, lads? Good to see you all this morning, all nice and fresh in the bank holiday.
Not too fresh.
No, definitely not too fresh. It's a long weekend, Katie Taylor, etc., but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about another great Titanic battle that took place. We'll start above in Salt Hill, I think, because it was, Shane, it was the game you were at, Rory was at it, and myself. Longford's biggest Galway hurling fan, Conor Neville, was definitely glued to it, as was I. I'm going to start at the end, actually, because I have a feeling a few of us may disagree on this point. I 100% think that was a free at the end. I think Paddy Deegan fouled Tom Monaghan. I think he went through him. He may have been going for the ball. He may have even got close to the ball, but he also clattered the back of his helmet. Shane, as a dyed-in-the-wool hurling man, I have a feeling you're going to disagree with me.
I tell you now, Mikey, with everything that was going on in Salt Hill yesterday, I think the only person that was fully watching that play was Colm Lyons, because it was just crazy town before, with the ball popping out to John Donnelly. Everybody was just waiting for the umpire to pick up the flag. I'd say the umpire hardly had the flag picked up and the ball was there. So did I see it in real time? No, but I suppose watching it back when I got a chance, when I went home, for me, I felt there was a connection with the ball and the ball went forward. So look, for me, it wasn't, but I think it was everything that went on. I suppose I was down in Wexford Park 2 weeks ago as well, Mikey, when Conor Cooney got pulled up for taking too long. And I thought this was deja vu again. I thought when Colm Lyons blew it, he was blowing him up for taking too long. But credit to Conor Cooney, I tell you lads, he got no easy free yesterday and he nailed 6 of them. And that was a massive pressure free, but he's just nice and calm over. He doesn't look like he's killing the ball either. He's just striking it nice and gently. But look, for me, Mikey, probably wasn't a free, but look,
and it was windy. There was a fair wind, Shane, wasn't there?
Fair breeze, Rory, going like say Kilkenny boys would have had in the second half going down to that right hand corner, always breezy in Salt Hill regardless of the time of the year. But just I thought that Galway were, while it came down to a free in the last minute, Rory, in my opinion, Galway were the better team.
They were the better side.
I just have it written down, 22 minutes into the second half before Galway get their first point from play. I think Joseph Cooney got it. So that'll tell you that they had 9 wides, and Henry was, I'd say he'll be disappointed with some of the shot selection, as you said, Rory, particularly with the breeze that was there, lads. Some of the shot selection wasn't good out by the sideline, but if they tidied those things up and they took half those chances, for me, whether John Donnelly got that goal at the end or not, they would have been we would pull away handy enough, lads.
Just on the free, Conor, I'm wondering what your opinion is. Derek McGrath last night, the man ball and all defence, I'm not sure would stand up in a court of law.
Well, my instinct initially, and this is what Colin Lyons had to look at, was that it was a free. That Deegan, there was a bit of a lunge from Deegan. He was a fraction late. It was man ball and all, but it was very much man. It was in that order. Man came first. He had to go through the man's helmet to get to the ball. I mean, look, Kilkenny were very exercised by it, and under Kilkenny rules, I mean, from what we hear, I mean, I was never at
rules?
I was never at a Brian Cody training session, but I suspect it wouldn't be blown. Not alone would Paddy Deegan not be penalised, he'd probably get some award after it. So
yeah,
I mean,
yellow for diving, Conor, in
Yeah.
So thank God for a Cork ref. But yeah, I mean, the call was made.
They actually apply the rules.
The call was made. I mean, I thought I could see why Kilkenny were annoyed, because often in sort of the championship rules of engagement, there's sometimes an understanding that those sort of things are let belt away. He made the call. I thought it was on balance just about right, and yeah, it was well slotted away by Cooney. Yeah.
On the game itself, Rory, Galway, as we mentioned here after the Wexford game, their physicality is something that they should use. And I think it's something they use yesterday, because Kilkenny are not easily rattled. And how one of those Galway goals came around was basically Owen Murphy being put in a fairly sticky situation and trying to loop a questionable hand pass over somebody's head. Galway made life very uncomfortable for Kilkenny. A lot of turnovers, like a lot of very strong tackles, which is exactly what you'd expect. And it's exactly imagine this is how they have so much skill, but to get that for us to see and enjoy that skill, and for them to get the benefit of it, this is also what they need to do. They have to use this physicality. They have to use the size they have around the field and the athleticism.
They have it in abundance. I thought Dahi Burke was out, like it was like the Dahi Burke of old. He was just absolutely lording it on the edge of the square. Right throughout the team, they've got, like as I said to you before, I think Henry's very clear in terms of it's a very Kilkenny-esque way of building your team. He plants a really strong spine right down through the middle and then fleshes it out around the edges, and there's total commitment. It was a funny atmosphere around Salt Hill yesterday. Like I was speaking and Jackie mentioned the exact same, because he had come up the night before, I think, and mentioned how there seemed to be a sort of a quite a dispirited preview mindset for a lot of Galway hurling supporters. Like they were kind of half hoping that they'd maybe wouldn't get an absolute trim in here, and they were expecting maybe a 4 or 5 point defeat. There wasn't a huge amount of expectation, and I think they delivered in spades. They've also blown the championship, I think, to a certain degree, wide open. I know everybody keeps harping on about Limerick, and look, we'll see. The injuries are starting to toll up, as we know, on that side of it. But from an overall context, I think yesterday's result, Galway were good value for it. I think, as Shane mentioned correctly, they won the game by a point, but they were probably more than 1 point winners. And I think they've really put themselves in the frame now for the latter stages. I think they should come out of Leinster at this point. And I suppose from the rest of us, from as far as the rest of us are concerned, like it's Brian Cody versus Henry Shefflin part 2, and maybe part 3. Let's hope we get it again,
Shane, they were, you could say the 1 point defeat perhaps flattered Kilkenny a bit, But you also have to ask yourself, if TJ Reid had stayed on the field, like, you know, could things have been different? What did you see there? Was he just not quite right, or were you surprised when he went off at halftime? Because he was he did seem a little bit subdued by his high standards, and then like when he didn't come out, there wasn't a great amount of shock, I suppose.
Yeah, I remember the first ball he got in his hand, Mikey, was a free, and just, you know, when you're doing co-coms or you're doing something and you just have F down beside the free taker, and I actually had just a little line put down beside him. I looked up and I couldn't believe he'd missed it. Now maybe was that the start of his bad day? Like, I mean, I thought he might have come back out just for the fact that they had the breeze. He's such a target man. He had scored a point from play just before that, but no, they didn't bring him back out. And, you know, and like Cody did he wasn't long making changes now with people that he wasn't happy with. James Maher came off, I think there was 23 minutes gone, just from being a midfielder. If you're off after 22, 23 minutes, not looking good for the next day, maybe for him. Killian Buckley got taken off, you know. I thought, like, Conor Brown taken off, TJ taken off. Like, there was kind of an air around the place that, like, I kind of a gasp, like, TJ has been taken off. But I suppose that's just the ruthlessness with the manager. You know, to be fair, Tom Phelan came on, he got on a lot of ball. He actually gave a serious hand pass around the back. Yeah. And I think Colin Lyons blew it for a throw. So it was another 50-50 one. But, you know, he has that kind of, I think that confidence.
That's one thing Cody might actually blow in training, I'd say, is a behind the back hand pass.
I also heard the interesting fact that Tom Phelan is a farmer. And I don't think there has been a farmer playing for Kilkenny. Nicky Brennan was trying to tell me since John Powers' days, I think. So he's Connie Shamrock's man and a farmer. But yeah, look, I don't know. Like,
so you don't think TJ was injured? You just think he was off?
No, he wasn't.
I think he was taken off. Yeah.
Oh, he was just off form, and they were not happy with him. Even when he missed that free, you could see in the sideline.
And he missed the second one, which wasn't as easy, but yeah.
No, and then he came out the field and nailed one out the field against the breeze. But look, I think, TJ, you know, it'll be a massive lesson for him. Will he start the next day? I still think he will. I think the man now is Owen Cody. Like, you know, I really do after yesterday. And you're good with the stats now, boys. Was there only 2 yellow cards yesterday?
There wasn't many anyway. I'm not sure.
Think I have down 2 yellows, right? And I think the most fouled man in South Hill yesterday was Owen Cody. But Owen Cody finished the game with one of those yellows. So, like, you could see the frustration on the sideline with Kilkenny boys. You know, it just added fuel to the fire. Like, he got on the ball. I think he was on the ball maybe 17, 18 times in the game. And he got fouled for 5 of those. Picked off 1-2 from play himself. But the frustration was Jack Grealish or Darren Morrissey or whoever was near him was constantly fouling him. But I was really impressed with him yesterday. And I thought the one Galway guy who kind of curtailed him when he went back in him or went near him was Pádraig Mannion. And he kind of just cut off the ball. Won two great balls near the end. But while TJ, it didn't happen for TJ, I think, you know, with Henry, TJ, and I think the next king in waiting now for Kilkenny is Owen Cody, in my opinion, and the way he hurled there yesterday, lads.
Yeah, keeping it in the family, the nephew of the opposing manager. Conor, what did you like about this Galway performance?
I thought again the middle third between the half back line and the midfield were fantastic for Galway. I mean, particularly the two midfielders, Tom Monaghan, who's been knocking around the panel for a few years. He has an All-Ireland medal, didn't really play in 2017 except for maybe the odd cameo earlier in the season. He's really come into his own this year. Joseph Cooney was superb. He was actually, I mean, he was extremely good against Wexford overall, particularly in the second half in terms of winning ball. He scored 2 points against Wexford, was very good. That was all obliterated because, you know, that failure to pass the ball sort of lodged in the public mind afterwards. But I mean, he was fantastic. And yesterday he was absolutely superb. 5 points from play. He missed a chance late on. I think Galway had a few chances to push 4 points ahead sort of at the very end, and were trying sort of shots that weren't on. And every time they missed, there was an air of foreboding that you were asking for trouble here, as indeed it subsequently arrived. But Galway, I think that they are defensively very good. I mean, I know Shane is alluding to their they're sort of being a bit heavy-handed in the corner on Owen Cody. The two cornerbacks, you know, are very...
I don't think they'll be the last to be heavy-handed on Owen Cody in an attempt to stop him, though.
I know you were complaining about their tactics on Rory O'Connor the week before as well, or 2 weeks before.
So well, he was just outnumbered more than anything, really.
Yeah. They're very good on the opposing puck out, I thought, particularly that half back line, and the midfield were excellent at getting forward and supporting attacks and popping over points. So, you know, they're playing very well, Galway, and their shooting in the first half was very good. It deteriorated towards the end, but it was very good in the first half.
Yeah. But Rory, we all know that this match was only a precursor to a handshake anyway. So what did you make of the handshake, Rory?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting though. It was like in the media, you build things up. You try and latch onto a narrative and you try and build something up and you try and make out like, and we saw last year Davy and Brian Lohan and Clare with the Clare Wexford thing, and nothing really came of it. It was pretty nondescript and it just kind of passed off really without much of a fuss. And it was largely the same yesterday, just in terms of what we were able to see in a TV context until the very, very end. And in a 5-second, and it just within 1 5-second handshake, the whole thing seemed to come to fruition in that it just looked like Brian Cody kind of letting him know, like it was just one of these funny moments, I suppose, really, where like, how could you do this to us, to us, like, like it was like this, the jilted lover. But I did feel it was a little bit disrespectful too, to a certain extent, from Henry's point of view, in terms of like, Henry has been an incredible servant to Kilkenny hurling, and a lot of the success that Brian Cody enjoyed as a manager, Henry has made an enormous contribution. So I don't know. I mean, like, how much can you read into it? We'll meet again. We'll see you again down the road. Yeah, I'm sure they will. Henry took the Galway job. It was a great opportunity for him to go and be an intercounty manager. He couldn't really hang around for the Kilkenny job because who knows when that's going to come up. So yeah, like, I don't know. Is there more being made of this than we're reading into it, or like, I don't know. What do you think, Shane?
I don't know. I think I don't know. Maybe a lot of people now might be roaring at this when they're hearing me say, "How dare I say that?" But I think Brian Cody was wrong yesterday. I think he was totally wrong. And from where I was looking, and I'll tell you, for my reason is that, as you said, Rory, before this, when we look back at the history of Irish sport and you look back about who are the greatest, like, and all this, and Brian Cody, rightly so, will be up there amongst anyone for what he has achieved. It'll never be seen again as a manager ever in the history of the GAA. But like, he's a manager of Kilkenny since late 1998. We had some fair battles with him. We had unbelievable battles in National League finals, All-Ireland finals. And I'd say he should know the routine by now, is that at the final whistle, the managers nearly make their way towards each other. From where I was yesterday, the Kilkenny manager made his way straight towards the middle of the field. Who he wanted to talk to, I don't know. Maybe it was the ref, but he wasn't for turning, I think, for a handshake. And I feel, from my point of view, and people can disagree if they want, that it was the Galway manager, it was Henry Shefflin that instigated the handshake, had to maybe call a couple of times for him to come back. When they did come back, I feel it was fairly frosty now, lads. As I said yesterday, the iceberg that hit the Titanic there nearly came between them. It was that cold. Like, so,
yeah, it was pretty cold. Like, and we kind of went in for a second. We kind of went in for a second pull. Like, there was the second kind of.
Yeah, I know, and I know we don't want to talk about a handshake, like, or not. Like, but I mean, that's what it was going to be. That's what it was going to be. I mean, Brian Cody didn't travel up with the team yesterday, as far as I know. I think he came up on his own because he didn't want, the media or anyone focusing in on him coming in with the team. What would he do if he seen Henry before the
Neither
match?
of them, both of them refused to do pre-match interviews as well.
So that was there. It was obviously on their mind as well, Rory, I'd say, before the game. But look, and then he pulled him in, and Henry, I was just watching Henry leaving the field, and his body language for me was a fellow who was maybe not disappointed with the results, obviously, but I think a little bit disappointed with what went on afterwards between the two managers. Will they meet again? Hopefully they will. But for me,
it was a bit like that moment though, where Luke finds out that Dart is really a bad dude.
Another Star Wars reference.
I know, yeah, he loves them. Shane,
I love the Star Wars reference.
Shane, do you think Cody's reaction would have been different if Kilkenny had won?
I say even if it was a draw. Because it was a game that Galway were the better team overall. And like that goal that got, like, I mean, Éanna Murphy will be disappointed with himself with the goal. It just bounced up, hit him in the chest and goes into the side net. John Donnelly was a good 30-35 yards out at an angle. He'll be disappointed with himself. So, I'd say even if it was a draw, Brian Cody would have been a lot happier. But look, I'm not going to question Brian Cody as a manager. I'm just going to question what I see with my own eyes yesterday above in Salt Hill, in that the two managers are not come together. One was coming this way, and as I said to you, there was a 90-degree angle, going for the other manager. And it wasn't for turning.
And Mikey, if you kind of look back, right? I mean, did Henry Shefflin get into his car and drive back to Kilkenny, taking any pleasure out of that yesterday? I doubt it. I wouldn't say there was any pleasure. I'd say there's quiet satisfaction, and it was a job done, and he's there to do a job, and they did their job well. I mean, if you look back through hurling history, like, you only have to watch the interview with Eamon Cregan at the full-time whistle in 1994 when Offaly nicked one from Limerick, and the pain etched across Eamon Cregan's face when he had now faced the realization that he'd obviously delivered an All-Ireland title against his own county, who had been striving for so much for success, starved of success for so long. It was the exact same for Justin McCarthy. It was the exact same for John Maughan, I would imagine, when Leitrim beat Mayo in 1994, or was it 92, 94? Look, this is the nature of the game. I just think, look, Brian Cody is a very old school manager, would probably not really appreciate of people going and managing outside Kilkenny. They're quite insular in Kilkenny in a general sense. It's all about Kilkenny for them. And it was quite the moment.
We'll have to move on. We could talk about this handshake all day, but we'll move south to matters in Semple Stadium. Conor said it about Derry, maybe with the football, that you can make a game look easy. I think Clare have done that in the first two games. They're obviously, what they're doing is a tactical masterstroke for Brian Lohan, and he's using his players the way he should, but they're making the game of hurling look kind of as simple as it can do sometimes when the team plays it well. Their forward line seems to be incredibly fluid. They're working very, very hard. And again, as I said with Derry, if you have a good half back line, you go a long way. And Diarmuid Ryan, John Conlon and David McInerney were just hoovering up Cork puckouts yesterday. And they look like a serious team.
Yeah, I mean, I was writing about Brian Lohan at the end of last week, and there was a sense that they were a forgotten team. Now, they had a bye in week one, so that probably conditioned some sort of engineered that situation where they seemed to be coming in under the radar. But they had a very underwhelming league. Obviously, we now know that the league is about as reliable as the horoscopes in terms of judging what happens in the hurling championship at this point. We can just... The best thing is just to forget it happened, really.
The league isn't even the league anymore.
The league isn't even the league. It's just, But, it's superb. Their forward line now, tellingly, is an ensemble, really, at this point. It had been there was a sense, Tony Kelly played incredibly well in 2020 and 2021, and it seemed to me that he seemed to be almost benefiting from the absence of any A-listers in the forward line alongside him. It was like the stage had been cleared for him, and he was monopolising all their scoring haul. They actually in 2020, as Mick Foley said, I think last week, in 2021 they were very close to an All-Ireland final, had been probably underrated coming into the championship. Had a big statement win last week, and probably an even bigger statement this week. Peter Duggan there has come back. He looks really he's sharpening up. He's very imposing. He seems to be playing with great vigor. Shane O'Donnell is there. He's obviously, he was out for the year, and he's really buzzing now. Their forward line has a great balance to it. There seems to be a great balance to their team at the moment, and they're bringing a more intense physicality than we would have associated with them for a while. There was a perception that they were a slightly light team, and this is why. This is partially, I suppose, why they weren't rated, because it was perceived that they wouldn't really have the physical tools to take on Limerick ultimately when it comes to it. And we'll see how it goes. The fixture schedule actually might have fallen for them, because I believe they played Limerick's last game was against Clare.
Yeah.
And Limerick have a bit of a tendency in the last few years to, so it's likely Italian-style tendency to not really go fully at it if there's nothing at stake for them. We saw that in 2018, we saw it in 2019. And we see it in their attitude to the league currently. Yeah. So it's all falling in for Clare, and looks like they look a good bet for a Munster, and a Munster title will be a real target for them, you'd imagine.
They haven't won one this century, have they?
They haven't won one. They're the only Munster team that haven't won one in the 21st century. 98 is the last. Won the All Ireland, obviously, but yeah, I'd say they'll be eager. They'll be gunning for that.
That's Shane. It's not a bad point Conor makes about the physicality. They do seem to be a team now made in the image of their manager, shall we say, in his playing day. He's added a bit of steel to what we always considered a skillful team, and they now manage to marry the two elements.
Yeah, absolutely, Mikey. But I just see Brian Lohan there yesterday as a great image going around. Like, he's not the most emotional on the outside guy anyway, you know, but obviously he has the respect of the players. They really like him. They like what he's about. But even yesterday, I just love seeing him. He just went up to the crowd and just kind of, not too flamboyant, but just kind of, he knew that they were behind him. He could feel that all week in Clare coming up to the game when a lot of people felt, you know, they were outside the top three. And I was just reading up on them, like say, before they started the Munster Championship this year, they'd only 3 wins from 7 games, like before that in the Munster Championship. We know they haven't won it. But what I liked about them yesterday was, all right, you talk about they have their best team back in the field, and you just kind of relate to
they have a couple of more still to come, Shane.
Yeah, you still have Aidan McCarthy not there, you know, whether he'll come back, if Shane Meehan's going to be right, Mark Rogers. But I was listening to LeBron James there. I'm not a huge basketball man, but I like listening to what they're saying sometimes. And they asked him about the Lakers, like, and why weren't you so good, or why aren't you clicking together? And he just said it's because we haven't been on the court together. And like, I think that's similar with Clare, like, in that, like, why haven't we seen this from Clare? It's because for the first time in a long time, you could look out on the pitch and you can see Tony Kelly, Peter Duggan, and Shane O'Donnell all on the field at the same time. And the 3 of them on the field for any team is massive, and the confidence they give the rest of the group. Like yesterday, they go 2 points to 1 down, and in the next 25 minutes, they outscore Cork 14 points to 2, because they just have this talent on the field now and it's not all on Tony. Like, they can get the ball to 5 or 6 shooters now, whereas they couldn't before in previous years, like, you know. And the other thing for me was the maturity of the group. Like, before, maybe with Clare, or maybe even, like, you know, with my own county, if a lad got sent off, you know, the body language, everything drops. What happened yesterday? Clare scored the next 3 points.
They got better after the sending off.
Like, and it looked like, even listening to the comments, like, it looked like felt like Clare had the extra guy, because they had that Brian Lohan spirit. Like, we talk about Brian Cody was like a spirit that can never be broken. And I think that's what Lohan is trying to get into the Clare crowd, is a spirit that can't be broken. Right, we're after losing the man. Let's see how you react. And geez, lads, he will be delighted with how they reacted with the next 3 points. And for me, like the Galway game, lads, Clare were much better team yesterday.
It was a 2-point hammering. Like, they were 15-4 up at one stage, and that did not actually flatter them one bit. That was like, now Cork rallied twice. Late in the first half, which made a bit of a liar out of the scoreboard going in at halftime, even though they were 6 down. I felt it was a much bigger gap. And then late on in the game then as well, to bring it back to 2, but it was desperation stuff. Like, Clare were the better side. Like, he has forged a really good, do you know what Clare for me are? Clare for me are, they're kind of like, they're the opposite to Cork, in that for the first time ever, all my years watching Clare, they have genuine pace in their forward line now as well. They've got forwards that are really dangerous. I mean, if you even go back to the All-Irelands that they won with in Dalo's time, they only really had one forward. Like, they were dependent on James. You know, the scoring was a lot lower back then. They didn't have they've got 4 or 5 really good forwards. What he's after doing to Cathal Malone in terms of confidence and in terms of converting him into the kind of ball-winning midfielder, he got criticism about the repositioning of John Conlon into centre back. I would actually argue he's the form. He's nearly a better version in some ways than Tadhg de Búrca and Declan Hannon, because what he actually offers you is because he's got the forwards brain. He's very dangerous going forward. Like, he can do all of the sit back in the pocket, got a great paw, really good positional sense. But then once they get the ball moving in the opposite direction, he's really, really smart on that side of it. And I would say in Rory Hayes, only Sean Finn could match him. I mean, he hurled Jack O'Connor up a stick yesterday. Jack got the curly finger after 20 minutes. They brought in the next man in, hurled him up a stick as well. His ability to go on the front foot, to actually get out in front, attack the ball. I think Clare are contenders.
For the All Ireland, or for
Yeah, I
Munster?
do.
Scoring most corner forwards too. Like that's
Yeah, I do.
that's
I do.
kind of a
I do.
serious step,
I
like.
think, Claire, I think there's a unity of purpose. I think there's a really good momentum in behind them now. I think they've got a very good manager who, you know, people were saying this and that about them, you know, the league, or they don't have a plan, or they don't have this. For me, I thought Clare were absolutely outstanding yesterday. They deserve all the credit. They backed up their dismantling of Tip the week before by taking Cork to the cleaners, and I think they're well positioned now for a good assault on both Munster and Liam McCarthy.
Can I offer the counter view here, Conor, and ask you that are we looking a little bit like we were mentioned talking about Derry earlier and how the fixtures were unkind to them a little bit in the league, in that they were left with Roscommon and Galway in their last games, and they looked like world beaters until they met the other two really good teams in the division. Clare have been, it's been kind to Clare here that they've come up against Tip and Cork, who clearly are not vintage teams for these two counties. And as Rory pointed out, their next game is against the Limerick team, who could be wearing flip-flops. So could we maybe be getting a little bit too enthusiastic about them, or do we need to see them playing a geared up Waterford or Limerick?
I'm sympathetic to Rory's point, Jerry. I mean, you say the fixture list was kind to them. I mean, they played Tipperary after week one. They had a bye in week one, which I wouldn't have thought was ideal, because you're coming in slightly cold against a team who had cut their teeth in week one and played very well. Also, their next two games are at home, and we know how hard Ennis is to grind a win out of. I know Tipperary did in the round robin a few years ago, but it is very hard to win there. I mean, even Limerick have found it tricky to win there in the past. Clare and Waterford is a game that would intrigue me, I have to say. I mean, I know Waterford were clearly pegged as the second best team in the country, and probably still are. I mean, I don't know if there's enough evidence to suggest Clare have surpassed them at this point, but I'd be very interested in a game in Ennis between the two of them, and I would find that very hard to call, and I'd suspect I'd be leaning, maybe even with home advantage, to thinking Clare could take them. Both teams will progress from Munster now, I think, at this point.
It does look that way, Shane, doesn't it? Where do you put? Do you think Clare are serious contenders to be? Let's start with Munster finalists for a start, and then work from there.
I think they're serious. I think they're more or less true. I think Tip and Cork are more or less out of the championship now, lads. And while mathematically it might seem that they're not, like Tip have to go to Limerick next week. I think Kyle Hayes is going to be tugging. I think Shane Flanagan will probably be tugging. We've lost John McGrath, to add to what's going on at the moment. And
I think Ed Connolly's gone as well, is he?
Ed Connolly gone from the 20s there as well during the week. So he's going to be massive loss for the 20s, like with a cruise ship as well. So I just, there mightn't be a huge Tip following for that match, to be totally honest with you, lads, because I think they know the inevitable is going to happen. I seen them firsthand against Waterford last week. Again, Waterford got the 2 goals. Limerick's last 4 shots against Waterford were wides. Limerick would have won that match by 7 or 8 points, handy enough, in my opinion, from being there. And I'm just worried about what could happen Tip. And I just feel that Cork have to go down to Waterford. And I think Liam Cahill will feel that they didn't do themselves justice against Limerick, and that now they have a chance to basically knock Cork out of the championship as well, but also get their confidence back up and going, get them back up to 4 points as well. So go back and answer your question, Mikey, about Clare. I rated Clare from the start. I thought geographically with the fixtures, 2 games away in inverted commas, like both in Thurles, and then 2 games at home, like even statistically or geographically how to set out how they're going to get there. They only had to make 2 plans. They know their plan for Ennis, and they only had to make 1 plan for the 2 days in Thurles. It was the same thing, so that was all an advantage to them. I think while they have beaten the 2 of the weaker counties in Munster so far, be it Tip and Cork, what they have done and the confidence they'll get from doing that, and to take that at home to the next day against Limerick, I think it's massive. Do I think they'll beat Limerick in Ennis? I don't. I suppose it depends. Like Limerick will probably have 6 points going into it, so it depends what they put out. But I mean, their bench just seems to be awesome at the moment, and what John Kiley has, Mikey, is subs who want to be on the team and lads coming back from injury that he may be able to use against Clare. So I do think Clare are true, but I think the Munster final will be Limerick and Waterford, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just a word, Rory, the final game of the Munster Championship, Semple Stadium, 22nd of May, Tipperary versus Cork. This is going to be the oddest Munster Championship meeting between these 2 old rivals ever.
Yeah, it looks like a bit of a fall from grace this year for both of them. But look, mathematically, the two of them are not out of the championship yet. Like Tipperary,
they will be by the 22nd of May.
yeah. But look, you just don't know. I think there is always a chance, a very, very small one, though, I'd say at this stage. I think, like it has dead rubber written all over it. Unfortunately, I think what will probably happen on that day is you're going to have a square off for the right to play in the Munster final between Waterford and Clare. That'll be a really interesting game, and I think Conor does make a good point. I mean, I look, I think Clare have been persistently and consistently written off. In fairness to Shane, not by Shane, but by a lot of us. I just think, like, they're just, to me, yesterday they were like Limerick light in one sense, in that, and most teams now at this stage have kind of figured out, if you go up and beat Cork up, then play your hurling, you'll probably make the rest of the game easy for yourself. And they absolutely did that yesterday. And they're quite physical. They're in really, really good shape. Like, they will give Waterford and Limerick socks of it. Mm-hmm. I would be sure of that. I think they're right in the mix here. Like, I would see 100% Clare are going to be in the last four.
Okay. Interesting. As we could talk about the other two games in Leinster, but let's be honest, Wexford 621, Laois 12, and Dublin 27 points to 116 winners over Westmeath.
Only 8 points.
Well, that's it. As discussed on the Sunday game last night, the Leinster Championship's a bit like the Six Nations now, so you do kind of need to make hay against Laois and Westmeath, and they could come back and bite Dublin on the arse, especially if especially if they draw one of their last games and lose one of them. They could end up getting pipped by Wexford on score difference, which would be.
They need to change that rule, though, Mikey. That rule needs to be changed. That, like, I think you need to. Like I said this to you before, we got relegated in a Dublin league ourselves. Here,
need to go head to head,
and they've changed the rule in Dublin. So it isn't your overall scoring difference. It's the scoring difference between the teams that are level on points. So the three teams that finished level on points worked out the scoring difference between the three of them. And we ended up being relegated. And I think that's probably what should happen. It shouldn't be overall scoring difference, because you just don't know, like, what challenge you're being represented with, whether it's Laois one week, Westmeath the next, what their ambitions are, what they're targeting. Are they going to go heavy this week? Are they not? So I think that would probably make for a fairer competition in terms of if it does come down to scoring difference, which it might do.
Yeah. Shane, what do you like, just finally, that idea that Wexford went out there and put 621 on Laois, basically, you would imagine for fear of coming up against score difference. Do you think it's kind of unhealthy? Do you think is it something that you should do in hurling? Should you just go out and keep scoring until you can't score anymore? Or, like, is there something slightly unseemly about it?
Sure, I suppose you want to win as much as you can, by as much as you can when you're the team that's in front. Like, I think the argument has been made, what do we do with the Laois and the Westmeaths of this world? I suppose the last big win for a kind of a Laois or a team coming up from Joe McDonough probably was 2019, I think, when Laois overturned Dublin in Port Laois that day. And they went on and they were competitive against Tip as well, like, in fairness, in Croke Park after that. But, like, for me, like I've said this before, coming from a small place, small club, like, if I got the opportunity to play 1 year at top level, Dan Breen club in Tip, I'd love it. Like, I just love the opportunity to play, just to see what it's like, see where I'm at, because I think that's where the learnings are for Mikey, to be honest. Like, I think for the Laois and the Westmeaths of the world, one of them is going to stay up, so they'll see, right, you're standing up beside a Dahi Burke, or you're standing up beside Cathal Mannion, for example, you're playing him in Galway, or standing beside a Rory O'Connor, you're playing him against Wexford, and you realise, right, I think I'm doing the gym right, but actually I'm not. I'm a mile off it. Look at the size of this fella. I think my diet's right, but obviously it's not. And the managers will have learnings from that too. So while they are taking big beatings, I think for them, the group and the players themselves, that's where they want to be, and that's where they want to learn. And it'll make them better club players too, when they go back to their club, to realise, right, that's where these guys are at. And maybe what it comes down to, lads, is, do the county boards realise this? Like, do the county boards with these counties realise, right, we thought we were giving you enough funding, but you know what, to be competitive, we're not, like, and that's the standard there, and that's the beating we're after getting. So if we want to be more competitive next year, we need to put more funding in it. So I think that's where they need to be at, to learn and maybe to get the support they need to try and be successful in the future. With the Laois and the Westmeaths, I think Dara will be delighted with what Wexford did yesterday. They needed it. Like, I think they'd only 7 wides in the whole match, so they needed that. They'll take the confidence to go into Westmeath. lads, there's a couple of humdingers, like, isn't there, you know, with Dublin welcoming Kilkenny to Parnell Park in a couple of weeks. But I think for Dara, like, it's Westmeath next week, or Westmeath 2 weeks. But I mean, to go to Nolan Park with a chance now, really, like, of saying that if Wexford could turn over Kilkenny and Nolan Park, get through in the Leinster Championship, it's a massive, it's brilliant. I love the round robin, lads. I think it's
a brilliant format. It really is.
No, it is. And yeah, as a Wexford man, I'm quite happy. 6:21 will do for me. That's it for today, lads. Thanks. We'll be back on Thursday to preview probably the weakest weekend of the championship, Cork Kerry in football.
The ambush is waiting, Mikey.
Galway, Leitrim, and then Limerick and Tip in the hurling. 4 of possibly the most, like, the bookies can't have any of those 4 games being very close, but we'll preview them. We'll preview the hell out of them. Thanks to Shane, thank you Conor, thank you Rory as always, and thank you to Kevin earlier, and we'll chat to you on Thursday. Good luck.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.